Welcome to Monk Wisdom. Listen to this story with great attention. Javier was in the living room of his small apartment, surrounded by half-packed boxes and photographs that no longer hung on the walls. Each object he touched seemed to whisper a memory. Every corner of the room evoked moments that were now tinged with sadness. The decision had been mutual, or at least that's what they had agreed to say, but the pain he felt was deeply personal and solitary. It was a grey autumn day, the leaves gently falling outside, and the world seemed to move at a different pace, indifferent to the emptiness that now lived in his heart. The separation, though expected, had hit him like an unexpected wave that left him breathless. His wife, Clara, had been not only his life partner, but also his best friend, and now the absence of her laughter filled the space with a deafening silence. In the first weeks after her departure, Javier tried to keep busy. He rearranged the furniture, tried cooking new recipes, and even joined a gym nearby. But every activity he undertook only served to remind him more vividly of the shared moments that would never return. The cleaning Saturdays together, movies on the couch, breakfasts in bed, everything had disappeared. Over time, his motivation to stay active waned. The boxes remained unpacked, books unread, and recipes untried. His world shrank to the four walls of his apartment, and loneliness began to grow deeper and darker. The days became indistinguishable from each other, marked only by the cycle of sunrise and sunset, which he watched from his living room window. Javier found himself avoiding calls from friends and family, fearful of facing the reality of his situation. Each conversation seemed to require an energy he no longer possessed, and words of comfort only seemed to accentuate his pain. He preferred the company of his loneliness, believing that it somehow protected him from the outside world and the possibility of more pain. Sheltered in his grief, Javier began to lose track of time. The memories of the good times, which initially served as comfort, became a constant reminder of all he had lost. As winter approached, the cold in his apartment seemed a reflection of his inner state, cold, empty, and bleak. This chapter of his life was marked by mourning and loss, a period that seemed to have no end. Javier, trapped in a sea of nostalgia and despair, did not yet know that the first step towards his healing was about to occur, a step that would take him out of the shadows of his loneliness into a light of hope and renewal. As the short, cold days of winter gave way to a late spring, Javier found himself in a constant cycle of melancholy and isolation. The accumulation of grey days inside seemed to reflect the still chilly weather outside. However, one morning something changed. Through a curtain that rarely opened, a ray of sunlight filtered in, cutting through the gloom of his living room and touching the mountain of boxes and personal items still to be sorted. That small beam of light seemed to signal something beyond just illuminating a forgotten corner. It was like a silent message, an invitation to remember that the outside world still existed, waiting for him. Although he initially ignored it, something inside Javier began to awaken, a barely perceptible feeling that grew with each new spring-illuminated dawn. Days later, as the light became more persistent and the song of birds began to filter through the walls of his apartment, Javier found himself standing in front of the window, watching the world come back to life. People were walking, flowers were beginning to sprout, and life continued, oblivious to his pain. It was then that he realized that, like nature, he too had the ability to be reborn, to start anew. Motivated by this epiphany, Javier made a decision that would change the course of his recovery. He decided that enough was enough, that he could not allow his life to stop while the world kept moving. That day, for the first time in months, Javier set out to leave his apartment. He had no clear destination, only knowing that he needed to walk, feel the sun on his face, and breathe fresh air. With a hesitant but determined step, he dressed, put on his shoes, and opened the door. The fresh spring air hit his face, and although it was almost shocking at first, gradually he felt the breeze bring some life back to him. He walked aimlessly, watching how people interacted, laughed, and enjoyed the simplicity of a sunny day. Each step he took seemed to move him a little further from the sadness that had marked his recent months. During his walk, his mind began to clear, and ideas of despair slowly gave way to warmer thoughts of hope. He didn't know exactly what he was looking for, but the simple act of moving made him feel more alive than he had in a long time. Javier didn't know it yet, but his walk would lead him to a fortuitous encounter that would mark a before and after in his healing process. An encounter that would show him that sometimes the answers we seek come in the most unexpected ways. It was a warm spring afternoon when Javier, still with his mind swirling with thoughts and emotions, found himself walking through a park near his apartment, a place he used to visit often with Clara, but had avoided for months. The blooming trees and the bustle of people enjoying the outdoors vividly contrasted with his long winter of loneliness and silence. As he wandered aimlessly, his eyes landed on an elderly man sitting on one of the benches, dressed in simple but dignified clothes with an air of tranquility that seemed to envelop him like an aura. Intrigued by the serenity the old man emanated, Javier slowly approached. The elder, who appeared to be meditating, opened his eyes and gifted Javier with a warm and welcoming smile. Something about that smile, free of any judgment and filled with peace, invited Javier to sit beside him. With a soft but clear voice, the elder introduced himself as Mateo, a monk who had dedicated much of his life to meditation and the study of Buddhist teachings. Javier, driven by an instant feeling of trust, and perhaps moved by the need to talk to someone who seemed so removed from his own turmoil, shared his story of pain and loss. Mateo listened attentively, nodding occasionally, allowing Javier to express everything he had been holding inside. Once Javier had finished, the monk shared some reflections that deeply resonated with him. He spoke about the nature of suffering and impermanence, key concepts in Buddhist teachings, explaining how accepting these can lead to greater inner peace. "Javier," Mateo said in a calm voice, "the loneliness you feel is like the winter that passed. It's cold and seems endless, but spring always arrives. Loneliness can be a teacher, not just an enemy. It offers you space to reflect, grow, and ultimately be reborn. Sometimes we need to be alone to truly understand who we are." The monk also spoke about the importance of compassion, not only towards others but towards oneself, especially in times of pain. "Be kind to yourself, Javier. Allow your pain to teach you and guide you towards a deeper understanding of your life and desires." Mateo's words struck a chord with Javier. For the first time in months, he felt a spark of hope, a possibility that he might find a way forward. Mateo offered to teach him some meditation techniques to help him manage his emotions and find peace in his daily life. Grateful and feeling that something significant had changed within him, Javier enthusiastically accepted the offer. Thus began their regular sessions in the park, each marking a further step on his path toward emotional recovery. The meditation sessions with Mateo became a fundamental pillar in Javier's life. Each meeting in the park, under the shade of blooming trees, was an opportunity to deepen his understanding of himself and the world around him. Mateo taught him various meditation techniques that helped Javier calm his mind and observe his emotions without being swept away by them. Over time, Javier began to notice subtle changes in his perception of loneliness. What was once a continuous torment began to transform into moments of quiet reflection. He learned to sit with his feelings, to understand them as passengers in his life and not as definitions of his being. This new ability allowed him to start letting go of the pain and sadness that had consumed him. As weeks turned into months, Javier also rediscovered his love for nature and for the small joys he had previously overlooked. Mateo encouraged him to walk, to observe, to truly see the world around him. These walks became a form of active meditation, where each step reaffirmed his connection with the world. Javier also began to apply the compassion that Mateo spoke so much about. He started by offering compassion to himself, accepting his past and his mistakes without judgment. Then, this compassion extended to others. Javier reconnected with old friends and family, approaching them not only to seek comfort, but also to offer it. Javier's internal transformation was profound. He no longer saw loneliness as a curse, but as a sacred space for growth and introspection. His life began to fill with meaning again, not because the circumstances had dramatically changed, but because his attitude towards them had evolved. One afternoon, while meditating alone in the park, Javier reached a moment of clarity. A sense of peace overwhelmed him, a peace that came from fully accepting every part of his life, without resistance. It was a subtle but powerful enlightenment, the realization that happiness does not depend on external circumstances, but on internal harmony. With this new understanding, Javier felt ready to face life with renewed hope and openness. Loneliness was no longer his enemy, but a companion on his journey towards self-discovery and authentic happiness. Thanks to Mateo's teachings and his own willingness to change, Javier was now equipped to build a fulfilling and meaningful life, regardless of the challenges that might arise. With the arrival of summer, the park where Javier had learned to meditate blossomed in all its splendor. The regular sessions with Mateo had sown in Javier a new way of seeing life, and now, as the season progressed, he too blossomed, reborn through his understanding and acceptance of loneliness and impermanence. This rebirth was not only manifested internally, but also in his actions and relationships. Javier resumed old hobbies that he had abandoned, finding in them not only pleasure, but also a source of meditation and connection. Photography, in particular, became his favorite pastime, allowing him to capture moments of beauty in the everyday and reflect on them. The compassion and openness he had cultivated translated into a renewed social life. Javier began to reconnect with friends and family from a place of honesty and vulnerability. Conversations that he had previously feared due to judgment now became safe spaces to share and listen. Additionally, he became a volunteer at a local meditation center where he shared his experience and learning with others who were also going through difficult periods, extending a hand in the same way that Mateo had done with him. In these interactions, Javier not only found satisfaction in helping others, but each act of service reinforced his own healing process. The empathy and understanding he offered to others were a mirror of what he had learned to give himself. This reciprocity enriched his life, filling it with a deeper purpose. Over time, Javier also dared to explore new relationships. With a more solid foundation of self-knowledge and self-acceptance, he felt more prepared to open his heart again, this time with a clear understanding of what he wanted and needed in a partner. His relationship with himself had changed radically, and that was reflected in how he related to others. One evening, while watching the sunset in the park, Javier reflected on his journey. He remembered the long nights of hopelessness and the grey days of loneliness. Although those memories still evoked an echo of pain, they no longer paralyzed him. He had learned to be grateful for each experience, knowing that they all were part of his path to rebirth. Now, looking forward, Javier felt like the trees around him, rooted but always reaching towards the sky. Loneliness had ceased to be a prison and had become a garden of possibilities. As the sun set, painting the sky shades of orange and pink, Javier felt grateful for every step of the way, knowing that each moment of pain had been necessary to reach this place of peace and fulfillment. Javier's rebirth was a testament to the transformative power of introspection, meditation, and openness to change. His story was one of many, a thread in the broader fabric of human experience, where each challenge is an opportunity to learn, grow, and ultimately flourish. Don't forget to subscribe to Monk's Wisdom for more empowering videos, and if you like this story, I invite you to watch 10 Buddhist tips for managing intrusive thoughts. These stories transform your journey towards a bolder, more confident life surrounded by good moments. Until next time.